This is Turn 1 Thoughtseize. I'm Ahren.
And I'm Zach.
And this is episode 70. What, Karnation? Because it turns out that Tron is really good. In this particular instance. For this week, or for last week rather, at Oklahoma City, it was all Biiiig Mana pretty much all the time. Tron just like Tron and Scapeshift, Valakut, and to a lesser degree Lantern, just dominated. It was very ugly. Karns all over the place, Ugins up in your face, Worm Coil Engines on turn 3, just madness. Dogs and cats living together. So I put out the call as I normally do before we record, and people wanted to know, unsurprisingly, about beating Tron, and to a slightly less surprising degree, also about banning Tron. And what people really wanted to hear about was deck lists. So we are going to cover all of those things in some order, and then hopefully we'll give you the news that you can use for the next couple of weeks. I don't know what is coming up because I'm not playing in anything major until well into the new year, so I have not paid a ton of attention as to what exactly is coming up for events. I'm sure you.
Well, there's a modern SCG in Columbus the first weekend of January.
Okay. And
I will be attending that, so gotta be ready. This is what modern looks like right now, and there is a lot of mana flying around. So.
Yes. Big mana.
Yeah, so I think it's time we do an homage to Biiig Mana decks.
Yes. So let's start with the banning. I guess we can kind of get that out of the way. Would I personally, as a human, love to ban it all? Yes, kind of. I think having Tron in the format is fine. I think having Karn probably exacerbates what would normally be like kind of a not that big a deal. Because if it was just like turn 3 Worm Coil Engine, I would be fine with that. And then if it was turn 4 Ugin, I would be fine with that too, I think. But like turn 3 Karn is just I think the thing that sticks in a lot of people's craw.
I mean, Karn is really good, but honestly, like, if you, like, I don't think it really matters what you cast. Like, as long as it's just a giant, colorless anything, like, if it's just Worm Coil Engine, it's still gonna be really hard to beat. Like, sure, you can path it, but, like, you know, I don't know, man. Just any giant colorless anything is gonna be tough. It's gonna be hard.
Yes. And obviously,
because like you see, I mean, even like just look at it now. Like look at Eldrazi Tron. Like turn 3 Thought-Knot Seer is really good. And so is turn 3 Reality Smasher and turn 3 Endbringer. There's just a ton of them. They're all good.
I mean, well, turn 2 Thought-Knot Seer is like the nut of things that are irritating.
Well, sure. I mean, it's still good on 3.
It's still it's great
still
on
good
3.
On 4 probably.
Also great on 4. It's almost like it's never bad.
Well, it's bad when they have no cards in hand, but that's the only time.
But even then, like, it's still 4 for 4. It's not the worst.
It's not the worst. Yeah, it's fair.
So, where does that leave us?
Well, my thing with Tron, like the reason, like you're saying that like it's Karn and these big stuff, and I agree with you. Like Karn is, Karn should be a 7 mana play, right? Like Karn is a 3 mana play is just outrageous.
Correct.
And it's not even so much that like it's just Karn on turn 3 is just too soon. Like even if you like stormed off, it'd be like ritual Karn or whatever on 3, that would still be really good. So
I would play that deck. I think that's
It sounds
maybe
like a sweet deck.
that's the next evolution of Storm. They're like, you know what, we're just gonna ritual into like gigantic planeswalkers.
I mean, yes, that is pretty sweet. But my problem with Tron, and this has been my problem with it the entire time it's been legal that I've played Modern, actually, because it's just always been legal, is that WotC changed their design policy very early on in the Modern like card pool, I guess. I think the last time they printed any like 3 mana or less Stone Rain effects was, I want to say Mirrodin with Molten Rain.
Yes.
And they printed Molten Rain at common in Mirrodin, but that Mirrodin was like 2004 or 2008 or something. It was a long time ago. Yeah, Mirrodin was a very long time ago. And that was like right at the beginning of Modern. And they have not printed 3 mana land destruction since.
Well, no.
And in fact,
because people hate it.
Yeah, because people hate it. But that's what's so frustrating, is that you can't cast your Molten Rain until they've already assembled Tron in a lot of situations, which is, I don't know. I just find that very frustrating. Like, if Tron was like they all tapped for 3, but you needed 4 of them, like that would be fine. But the problem is you just can't, like, you can't disrupt them in time. You have to play like people. I mean, I think Spreading Seas is a pretty awful card, but you just play it because it's cheaper than Stone Rain or Molten Rain. Like, you can actually interact with Tron before they have Tron, before they cast the thing that's going to do too much damage to you.
Right.
And it's the same thing. Like Ghost Courting a Tron player feels horrible, but at least they didn't get Tron yet, right? So.
Yeah, but they still have a waste so that they can cast their Thought-Knot Seer and take your next Molten Rain.
Well, yeah. I mean, yeah. No. I mean, you're right. Like, Ghost Courting feels really bad. Like, you kind of time walk yourself to just, like, you know, to give them 4 mana instead of 7 or whatever. So.
Yeah. So Mirrodin was 2003, by the way.
Sure. Yeah, and they haven't printed like 3 mana land destruction since then, and I mean, it's for the best. Like, land destruction isn't great, but that's why it's like, that's part of why Tron is so good, right? Is that there just aren't answers to what that deck is like doing, what that deck's really about.
Yes. Agreed. There's alternate art for Psychotog. Weird.
You need a Judge promo, right?
It was player rewards. The alternate art is Vintage Masters online.
Sure.
But, anyways, the only reason so I got to Psychotog by trying to figure out when Mirrodin came out, and so I looked up ATOG, and then I looked up Mirrodin printing, and then I got to that. So that's why I was looking at a page full of all the ATOGs, and there's fewer than I remember. I thought there were more. Who knows? Anyways, unrelated. So what can we ban? What's bannable? And I think there's 2 things. I honestly think...
Wait, is 8th edition one of them?
8th edition is not one of them.
Okay.
Because, like I said, I think big mana decks in general are fine. Like, there are plenty of ways for someone to make 4 mana on turn 2, 5 mana on turn 2, with like a little bit of luck. And I think that's fine. Like, that has a place. The problem that I have with Tron is the consistency. They've got a good shot of having natural Tron. If they don't have natural Tron, they've got a really good shot of having 2 pieces, and then everything else in the deck is either a straight up tutor or Ancient Stirrings that digs 5 deep, which is insane, or they also run basically 8 cantrips.
Yes.
That also fix your mana to then cast the Ancient Stirrings, so you draw a card off the Chromatic Star, and then cast your Ancient Stirrings, dig 5 deep, and then draw a card off that. Seems good. So it's really like 6 cards, kind of functionally 6 cards, except one of them is blind. That type of card, the commune effect, like the look at the top 5, is a relatively narrow thing, and having it at 1 CMC, there's only 3 of them that have ever been printed. Commune with Nature, which is, they're all green. Commune with Nature was like back in 03, came out in Champions, or 04. So Champions of Kamigawa, they printed Commune with Nature. It's top 5, but it only finds creatures, and it doesn't put the cards in your graveyard. It puts them on the bottom of your library. So that's why you might be thinking right now, what even is Commune with Nature? Is that a real card? Is that modern legal? Which was Zach's question when I brought it up. He's like, is that even modern legal? Answer, yes. But sees no play because just getting creatures is not good enough. Ancient Stirrings comes along in 2010. Yep, Rise of the Eldrazi. So 6 years later, they print this other thing, and at the time, it was still very good, right? Like, so 5 deep for 1 mana. The fact that it hits lands is super relevant, and you know there was plenty of colorless stuff at the time.
Well, I think at the time it wasn't that good. I think it was fine. It was like an okay card, and it was like the correct power level, right? But the problem is that the better the colorless cards get, the better the card gets, right?
Correct.
So it's like when this card was legal in Standard, you could play colorless cards, like you could play artifacts and creatures, but you couldn't play decks that were mono colorless cards. Like you couldn't, like your entire deck couldn't be colorless cards. So there was some fail rate to the card. There was some amount of like, you had to make sure you had enough hits, so you might have to play like extra colorless cards you didn't want to play, you know?
Sure. We don't have that problem anymore.
No, that problem is long gone.
So, as of right now, oh, and of course, lest we forget, Commune with Dinosaurs also exists.
That card's going to be good. Mark my words. It's not good yet. Not good yet. But it's got the right framework to be powerful, provided powerful dinosaurs exist, right?
Sure.
Like, it's definitely worse than Ancient Stirrings, but...
Yes, it is unconditionally worse than Ancient Stirrings. Unless your deck has like 32 dinosaurs in it. But if your deck has 32 dinosaurs in it, you probably don't need the additional consistency of Commune with Dinosaurs. Unless you need a specific dinosaur to do what you're doing. So, Ancient Stirrings, since its very sort of mild intentioned beginnings, I'd always been able to hit lands, had always been able to hit Eldrazi creatures and artifacts, but now planeswalkers, and then after, like, the thing I think that really puts it over the top for me is now that we have Devoid cards, Ancient Stirrings can actually hit every type of spell and permanent that exists in the game.
Yep.
Like, that, I know people don't necessarily use it for that. Like, they're not, nobody's Ancient Stirrings and they're like, oh man, I gotta hit my Molten Nursery. Like, I get that that's not happening, but the fact that it could happen, or that it has the ability now to hit every card type, is just a recipe for current and future disasters.
No, I agree with you. It's a card that's context got better as more cards were printed, right? Where like the pool of colorless cards grew. But honestly, like, it's not even that broken in the format because of that. Like, it is getting better because of that, and that is crossing the line. I totally agree on that. But just look at the cards it's getting, man. It's like, it's getting Mox Opals, which we've talked about. Very broken card, right?
Yep.
Power 9 level of power. Mox Opal is better than a lot of the cards in the Power 9 in the right deck. It's getting lands that tap for more than 1 mana, which, again, broken. It's getting, 3 mana or 7 mana planeswalkers that cost 3. It's getting lock pieces that literally just say your opponent doesn't have a combat step, which is, like, outrageous,
Mm-hmm.
And like the things it's getting are just outrageous, and they're very unique cards that were printed at one time and were realized to be mistakes. Like, it's finding these mistake-esque cards, essentially.
Right.
And like the thing about mistake cards is that you don't get 2 play sets of Mox Opals. Like, there is 1 Mox Opal, and that's it. You get that 1 play set of Mox Opals, and it's probably too good, but you get to play with it. But when this card can find, it like almost makes it that you get to play with like 2 play sets of these broken colorless cards. Like, Bant Eldrazi forever was a very bad deck, but let me retract it. It was not a bad deck. It was a good deck, but it should have been a bad deck except for the fact that it got to play with what felt like 6 to 7 Eldrazi temples, which was outrageous.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I'm with you. The card is too powerful.
Yep. It also has... banning Ancient Stirrings also has an additional benefit, which is it slows down Lantern in the same way. Like, the consistency of having Whir of Invention and Ancient Stirrings is probably too much, because then you're like basically running 16 copies of most of your deck. Not all of it, but a lot of it.
It's like 12. It's
like 12, but even so.
I mean, that's still way too many, right?
It's still way too many.
Well, and then you get to the part where like you can build, like, you get a toolbox added on to broken cards, which is outrageous.
Like, I have in the past built like almost all artifact sideboards and just used Ancient Stirrings to dig for them, and it was surprisingly decent. Like, that shouldn't be good. Like, having like 13 one-of artifacts and then 4 Ancient Stirrings to find them.
Well, no, but that's part of the problem, is that, like, in a standard format, in standard where there's 8 sets legal or whatever, however many sets are legal in standard at that given time, there is no chance you can build a sideboard full of just artifacts. Like, maybe if you stretched, you could get a bunch of artifacts in there. But it would just be wrong, because there would be some colored card that your deck could be playing that you should be playing, and you're, like, sacrificing playing that card to play artifacts, right?
Right.
But in Modern, there are enough artifacts that are very cheap and do very unique things that you're not even sacrificing that much. Like, between Pithing Needle and Grafdigger's Cage and Relic of Progenitus and, I don't know, generic other 1-mana artifact card, they all are super powerful. They do very powerful things, and they answer things that your main deck wouldn't answer very well generally. So, I mean, You're right. It's set up to just, like, on top of being like a broken card, like just game 1, it just makes your sideboarding even better.
Yeah. So that would be my pick currently. And also Valakut. Like, let's be real here for a minute. If you want to keep Primetime, you can't have Valakut. You can have one or the other. So you can either have Scapeshift, or you can have Primetime, or you can have Valakut, but you can't have all 3. It's like pick 2, right? So either ban the 1-card combo, Scapeshift, ban Primetime, because we've covered this at length before. Like, Primeval Titan is responsible for a number of cards on the ban list already. Or get rid of him, keep Scapeshift. Banning Primetime outright, like, probably hits more decks. Taking Valakut out really only hits the Titan Shift decks. And like maybe actually I don't think there's any Valakut deck that doesn't play some number of Primeval Titans. I think there's some that don't play like 4 Primetimes and 4 Summoners Pacts,
Well, there is one Valakut deck that doesn't play Primetime, but it doesn't see very much play anymore. I guess if that's
What is it?
like bring to Lightscape Shift doesn't play any Primetimes because he costs 6 and the Bring to Light is 5 or less.
Sure.
But yeah, like it's not.
Yeah, I haven't seen that deck in a minute, and I don't think it would be good right now. Anyway,
It actually is not bad right now. One of my friends is playing it online, and it was actually kind of impressive.
Huh.
It got really helped out by the fact that Search for Ascant is like very good in the
Oh,
deck.
jeez.
Yeah, that was what was helping it.
We'll come back to that.
Fair. But before we I want to let you continue with Valakut, but I just wanted to make one more point about Ancient Stirrings, and that is that I am totally with you on that. I think it should be banned right now, but I think that one of the things I find egregious about the card is like kind of the double standard it's setting, where like in these colorless decks like Tron or Eldrazi or Lantern, wherever you're playing Ancient Stirrings, it looks at 5 cards for 1 mana, and they have another card banned right now in Preordain and Ponder, where Preordain at most sees 3 cards for 1 mana, and I get it. It has better selection than Ancient Stirrings, debatably, I guess, in that it can take anything, but the rate of the 2 cards, like clearly Ancient Stirrings has a better rate for the amount of cards you're seeing for the mana you're paying, and it's like, if you tell me Ancient Stirrings should be legal, then I also think Preordain should be legal, but if you tell me like, hey, Preordain is too good, it shouldn't be in the format, then I kind of also think Ancient Stirrings is too good and shouldn't be in the format,
Yes, and just to be clear, unbanning Preordain would be like a ridiculous mistake.
Yeah, I don't think it would be great for the format. I'm just trying to make the point that it sets a double standard where one's legal and the other's not.
Yep, it absolutely does. You are correct. So,
I think Opt actually was like perfect. Like I'm very happy with the state of blue cantrips in Modern right now, where I don't think they're too good. I think they're at a very reasonable power level for cantrips. I think they are very good still, but not too good by any means, and I think it's reasonable. I think it's good, in a good spot.
No, I like Opt. Opt was actually, if you go way back, like, God, more than a year ago, we were like campaigning for Opt, and then dreams really do come true. So ban Ancient Stirrings, and then see where we were at, and then maybe think about banning Valakut. So that's all I'm saying. If you ban,
I would put the Valakut one like a step below Ancient Stirrings. Where,
yes,
I
agree.
think you could ban Valakut. I think that would be fine. Like Valakut was banned at one point, right? It was on the ban list and taken off.
It was like pre-banned.
Yeah. So I think you could ban Valakut, but I just don't think it's as pressing as a card like Ancient Stirrings, or maybe like once if cards were unbanned, say, like I think you could consider Ancient Stirrings like acceptable again, like if the power level of the format increased, right? I just think the way it is now, it just is like more powerful than other cards.
Yeah, but I don't think there's anything on the ban list currently that isn't like a silly, like a big power level jump. Like if you couldn't be like, oh, okay, we're gonna, you could say, let me rephrase that. You could say, we're going to ban Ancient Stirrings and unban Bloodbraid Elf. I think that would be fine. You couldn't say, we're going to ban Ancient Stirrings and unban Ponder, because that's too much.
Yeah, that's nonsense. Like I think if one's banned, I think they're very similar cards. Like if one's banned, the other one should also be banned. I don't know.
Yes. So there you go. Bottom line: ban Ancient Stirrings, and then see where we land. Do you want to do deck lists first, or do you want to talk about Do you want to talk about the actual deck lists or the...
Well, let's talk about how we got here. Let's talk about how we got to the deck lists we're about to talk about.
Yes.
For a second, right? So, the last 3 weeks, maybe 4, something like that, in the previous 2 episodes we did, we've been hitting on how Search for Azcanta was taking over Modern, right?
We have talked about it at length.
Yeah, and for the time we were talking about it, Search for Azcanta just started dominating. And in fact, if you look at last week's GP, Search for Azcanta did still dominate. It just kind of got dominated too, in a sense, where these fair blue Search for Azcanta decks are very, very good. In fact, Search for Azcanta is proving to be a Modern powerhouse, and it is so good, in fact, that it is pushing out some of the more linear strategies that it did a very good job of beating, such as like Affinity and or Burn and or Storm, Humans, decks like that where drawing a lot of cheap removal and or cheap counter spells was very good against. And in fact, it proved that Search for Azcanta was cheap enough and efficient enough that going under it was not a good plan. It didn't work very well, but going over the top of Search for Azcanta was very possible in Modern, and that's the reaction we're seeing right now, where Scapeshift and Tron and even Dredge to an extent, all of these decks, like Graveyard Recursion decks, all of these decks kind of go over the top of the Search for Azcanta decks, and that's why you see them doing so well, is that the field kind of pushed fair linear decks out, and then big mana decks just stomped on the fair search control decks, if you will.
Yep. And what I said online was I wanted to see somebody come in with happen to show up with Infect and just run house, which did happen. There were some people that brought Infect and did well on day 1. The problem is, and this was a similar problem to kind of what happened with, or actually I guess it's the opposite problem, what happened with Zach Elsick. So day 1, Zach goes 9-0 with Lantern. Just obliterates people. Day 2, it's just Tron. So there weren't enough people that were playing decks that prey on Tron's need to get set up for them to convert over to day 2, where he could then beat up on them. So he was beating up on all those people day 1, and just gets to day 2 and it's oh my god. So if somebody had day 2'd with the next, right, it's the next level, mm-hmm. right? It's what beats the thing that beats the thing that beats the best thing. And those are the decks that we're gonna try and talk about, or at least that's the idea.
Yep.
So big picture, the kind of stuff that we are talking about is fast combo, and by that I don't mean things that are we talked about how kind of going under them doesn't necessarily work. However, the fast combo, winning the game before they get set up, is a very valid strategy.
Oh, definitely. And I think you're very right about that, where you can't just assume this is still Modern. People are still going to play the decks they have. there will be some percentage of people in the field that are going to change the deck they're playing based on previous results, but there's also a large percentage of field that's just going to play the deck they own and that they feel comfortable with, right? So you can't assume that, like, oh, Tron won last weekend. Well, next weekend it's going to be only Tron, right? There's not going to be Search for Azcanta anymore, because that's just not the case. Like, there's still going to be people that want to play their Search for Azcanta decks, and they're still going to be good against, you know, some percentage of linear aggressive decks, right? But the Search for Azcanta decks can also be, you know, relatively weak to just taking turn 2 off to play Search for Azcanta. Like, you could just, you know, tap out for your Search for Azcanta and then die to an infect creature sometimes, you know?
Yep. I honestly, like, I've been playing Search in Rug Delver, and it is great. Asterisk. It is great when I need... When the game goes longer than I want, and I need to draw, like, specific answers, or, like, at least be able to roll the dice to hit a specific answer, that's when I really see the value of it. So, like, I've had multiple occasions where, and this happens in Legacy, I feel like more than in Modern, or at least previously, is if you're playing a blue deck and you've got, like, land removal spell, and your opponent goes to kill your threat, in Legacy, you would be able to go, okay, brainstorm, and hope that you hit force blue card. And depending on how your deck's put together, that's very possible. And you'll see that happen, where they're just like, oh, all right, well, I'll spin it. Roll the dice, see what happens. In my version of Rug Delver that has Disrupting Shoal, I am able to do the same thing, where I can go, oh, you're going to Fatal Push my Delver, I'll spin Search for Azcanta and either hit a Disrupting Shoal if I already have a blue card in my hand, or hit a blue card if I have a Disrupting Shoal, or sometimes just, like, hit a Vapor Snag, where I can be like, oh, okay, Vapor Snag my Delver, save him from getting killed.
Sure.
Or, like, a super long shot, like, find a spell... I have, like, spell Snapcaster. If I have a Snapcaster and I find a spell, I can sort of, like, counter it, snap counter it. That's a lot of mana, though. If the game has gone long enough where my 16 land deck has enough mana to activate Search for Azcanta and then, like, cast a spell and Snapcaster a spell, then that's probably not a game that I deserve to win.
It's probably a bad sign.
Yeah. But it does allow you to be, or it can be used proactively. Whether or not people are using it proactively, I don't know. I know that I am, and it has been to good result. So if you're not doing that, consider it, because it's solid. If you are doing that, well, congratulations. You're pretty good at Magic.
Sure.
So, fast combo, burn, fast aggro, and this is the same thing. It's going under them in the sense that you need to kill them before they go, you know, untap Karn. The other decks
let me clarify what we're talking about with these deck lists to play next weekend, right? Like, I think we made it clear that, like, you need to be able to beat Search for Azcanta. We kind of pointed that out, that is the card that is, like, kind of redefining the Modern tier structure at the moment. And you need to, like, you can't just play, like, the stock list from 2 weeks ago. Like, you need to make a couple changes to your deck where it's like, you know, if you're playing Burn this weekend, maybe you play 2 Molten Raids in your sideboard or 3 Molten Raids in your sideboard. Maybe that's the adjustment you need to make, you know? Or maybe your affinity, or not affinity, infect deck has, you know, like a Spreading Sea in it or something. Maybe that's a little too far, but there are some changes, you know, worth making. Or maybe just more Shaper Sanctuary is just the answer to be better against these Search for Azcanta decks. You need to build these decks with Search for Azcanta in mind, but you have to also understand that Tron is going to be doing well going forward, and so is Valakut, because they are so good against these search decks. And so playing these decks is looking a lot more enticing now, whereas before, if you told me, I was going to play Jeskai 5 or Jeskai / whatever search for Azcanta deck 5 out of 15 rounds, well, I wouldn't want to play Affinity or I wouldn't want to play Infect, because those 5 rounds that you play against that deck are probably going to be bad, and then you're probably going to have one round somewhere in there where you're just your deck doesn't function and you lose to yourself, and that's kind of setting yourself up for a mediocre tournament. But now with the search decks kind of getting pushed out by Tron players showing up and Valakut players, well, maybe these look better, and as long as you have a plan for when you do play against the search decks, they're going to look a lot better, right?
Yeah, I really like Spell Pierce a lot right now.
Spell Pierce is great.
That's been a thing because it functions even in a way where, against I've found myself, Rug Delver is basically an auto lose against Tron game 1. Forget about it. You are not going to beat them.
Is Disrupting Shoal good against Tron?
It is, in the sense that let me rephrase that. It is good because it gives you the potential for turn 0 interaction with them.
Sure.
So if they kept Forest, Tron Piece, Ancient Stirrings,
other stuff,
whatever other stuff, Chromatic Star, the Tron stuff.
Yeah.
If they go Forest, Ancient Stirrings, and you Disrupting Shoal that, that's a big deal. That's 2 time walks. I mean, sure. Because there's no way they're going to get online even close to turn 3. So yes, it is good. The problem is the redundancy. The best that I've ever been able to do against them is my turn 0, Disrupting Shoal your turn 1 play, and then hold up Spell Snare for your Sylvan Scrying.
Sure.
I've had that go off and still had trouble closing the game out. So
yeah, I mean, you really have to put a clock on Tron. You can't let the game drag on, because they're just going to draw Tron pieces eventually.
Right. And I guess that's the other thing that I want to emphasize is, if you're going to try and play a control game or a controlling game against Tron, you have to win by the mid game. You can't wait until turn 12 or turn 15, because you're already dead. They have Karn Online, they have World Breaker, they have all of these things. Their clocks are so fast and their haymakers are so strong that once one of them gets onto the field, you might be able to answer the first one, you're not going to be able to answer the second one. Or, I've been in the situation where it's answer the first Karn, counter the first Karn, kill the second Karn, and then lose to the Ugin, or lose to the Wormcoil Engine that I can't answer.
Yeah, and that's going to happen eventually. I will say, though, that you can actually go long with Tron now more than you could before, but you have to have a mechanism to repeatedly draw land destruction, essentially.
Sure.
Which didn't really exist before, but now you actually kind of can, search for Azcanta, find a Molten Rain, search for Azcanta, find another Crumble to Dust or whatever. Or a way to just, take them off of Tron.
Sure.
Essentially. So that is doable. I wouldn't suggest it as a strategy in general against Tron. I think it's a losing battle in most cases, but you can definitely win games now where you just search for Azcanta, find a Spreading Sea, search for Azcanta, find my Molten Rain, search for Azcanta, find this Rain of Tears, whatever.
Right.
I mean, you're fighting an uphill battle, and you're going to lose some percentage of them, but it's not unwinnable. I mean, that it is more realistic now than it was previously, I guess.
Agreed. I think the thing that's really going to turn that is like mono green Tron is just really good. Like as consistent as regular Tron is, like just having it be mono green where you don't have to worry about any splash color is just like you get the ramp and you get the ancient star. Like you still get all the stuff, but you don't have to mess around with like everything else. It's just mono green Tron is really good. I would not be surprised, like, because obviously what we're saying is you have to be proactive. You can't just sit around and expect to have like you don't have enough cards in your deck to blow up every Tron land, to blow up everything. Like they're gonna get there, and that's even true with Blood Moon, which I think is people's first reaction. They're like, "Oh, well, I'll just play Blood Moon," and that works to an extent. That works until turn 5, or it works until turn 4, and then they play Oblivion Stone, and then untap, play a land, blow up everything, and then you are completely shields down with basically an empty board, and then they just go, "Oh, look, I have all my mana back, Ulamog."
Yep.
So that is at best a temporary solution. Like you can't lock a Tron player out of the game completely with a Blood Moon.
No, and that's not the strategy we're advocating, right? But what we are saying is that there are decks in this format that are going to be very well positioned against Tron coming back. And in fact, there have been other times throughout Modern's history where Tron was very well positioned. It was a very good deck, very powerful, and doing very well in the format. And people played other decks that just crushed Tron, because there are decks that do that. And in fact, I think, to me, like the one that comes to mind right away is Infect. Yeah. Infect has always just like historically just preyed on Tron. Like whenever Tron was good, like you just wanted to be sleeving up Glistener Elves and Blighted Agents and just getting in there, because Tron forever could just never beat it. It's just like almost humorous how bad Tron's matchup is against that deck.
Right. Well, at the time though, like Jund was keeping Infect in check. Infect was keeping Tron in check, and Twin was the deck that you should have been playing. But
yeah, keeping everyone in check.
Yes, keeping everyone in check. And then people were like, "Oh, wait a minute, this is the best deck. I'm just gonna play this."
Yep.
Or Jund, because like the Jund matchup versus Twin was actually pretty good, because Abrupt Decay.
It was worse than people remember, though. It was fine, but the twin deck was still favored.
Yes, well, it was favored because like top deck Twin kill you was a thing, and if you didn't have the Abrupt Decay in your hand, you just lost.
Yeah, no, I mean that's true.
And that's also why people used to play a lot more Surgical Extractions. But I digress.
You're not relevant. Let's finish this list of decks we think are going to be good, and get to the real meat of why people are here today. The big mana decks.
So fast combo, obviously Storm. I would definitely count Infect as a fast combo deck, because that's really what it is. It's a become immense combo deck essentially.
And you can call it aggro or combo. Same result. They're dead pretty quick.
Yes. Burn. Burn's great. Like red white burn is a standby, is a format staple for a reason. It is very good against Tron. It is medium against Titan Shift or like Valakut decks.
It's great game one.
It's great.
You do not want to be on the burn side of an Obstinate Baloth, but
correct. So I think there's enough tools where like a little bit of tweaking could make that fine. Like Sudden Shock is huge in that, because the frustration obviously is like they play they'll play a secure tri-builder, block your Goblin Guide, pick up a land off your Goblin Guide trigger, probably, because they play, 25 lands, and then sacrifice the secure tri-builder, get another land, and then they're like one land away from Scapeshift kill you. And you can't put out that much damage before they like go back. And a lot of the stuff that like you would think, which is another thing that we will cover, which is exactly how Valakut works. Because originally I was like, oh man, Deflecting Palm will be great. And that is incorrect. And we will talk about why that is. But also, yeah, like they know that they lose to burn when burn is prepared, so they bring in Obstinate Balos. They bring in the Obstinate Balos mainly for Liliana.
Well, that's why it's in their sideboard, but they bring it in because it gains 4 against burn, right?
Sure. I would be against like Tron would definitely, they play Thragtusk.
Oh yeah, you're getting tusked.
And yeah, I mean Obstinate Baloth is definitely something, but so who knows? Maybe it's Leyline Punishment. I don't know.
But it's not like Burn doesn't have tools to fight these decks. Like maybe like for a long time here, I think people have just been on red white Burn. Maybe it's time to go back to red green Burn, and we can get some Atarka's Command action going on.
Yep, sure.
Or not red green, but Naya.
Naya. Yep. Or who knows? Maybe red black, right? Maybe it's
because I can't. Yeah, red black could potentially be
like
correct.
K command. K command is great against Lantern. It's great against Tron. Like any 2-for-1, like you can't effectively attrition Tron in the way that you would be able to attrition a normal deck because their cards are all worth more than one card.
Yeah, it's a tempo thing though. It's like cutting them off the mana that they've spent, right?
Right.
Yeah, slowing them down.
So Storm, Infect, Burn, Breach, any of the like the blue-red X Breach decks, because they can't beat like a turn 4 Emrakul. Like hasty Emrakul still kills them.
Yep.
Because they don't have any instant speed interaction that can take care of it. I think I don't know if any of the Breach variants that run Grizzlebrand are there. I think you probably at this point, like if you're gonna go over the top, I think you just no fooling around. I think you just play 4 Emrakuls. I think is correct.
Yeah, that has generally been where people move to. Where now you are either breaching Primetime or you're breaching Emrakul, and you're picking one of them, and you're playing 4 of the thing you're breaching.
By the same token, Goryo's Vengeance. I'm trying to think if Goryo's Vengeance, how that stacks up against the other stuff that we're recommending. Like it can beat Storm, can be ad nauseum. Infect is probably like that's just a coin flip, basically. Like whoever goes first is probably going to win.
Hey, I think it could very well be a good time for Black Red Goryo's Vengeance.
Yeah,
that's a deck that can very easily play main deck Blood Moon if it deems that to be the right thing at the right time.
Sure.
It's doing a very powerful thing. Graveyard Hate is on a decline, although still more Graveyard Hate in the format than there was, say, a month ago, but not nearly as much as there was, at the beginning of modern PPTQ season, say, in the summertime.
Right.
3, 4, 5 months ago, where there was just, you had to be playing 4 or 5 Dredge Hate cards in your sideboard.
Right.
At that time, and I think Goryo's Vengeance fell off the map at that point, and it just stopped kind of existing as a deck completely, but it could be time. It could be time to bring it back. It could do very well this weekend, or whenever the next event is.
Yeah, I think it's probably the straight reanimator version and not the Shael version, because like my problem with the Shael is when you go off, if you don't, like, if you miss, you're just dead. You've got 3 5/5 tokens from your World Spine Worm, hopefully, maybe, and that's pretty much it. And then, you know, you just like lose to Oblivion Stone.
Sure.
So I think just the straight up, like, turn 1 Faithless Looting, discard Grizzlebrand, you know, Simian Spirit Guide, Goryo's Vengeance, kill you, is pretty tight. I think that's a good place to be. Because also,
yeah,
like,
I agree.
Your life total, it matters in the sense that obviously it's the thing that keeps you alive, but it doesn't really matter.
Well, it doesn't matter against these Tron and Scapeshift decks, that's for sure.
Like,
when they kill you, you're dead. It doesn't. Yeah. Your life total could have been 1. It could have been, 30. Scapeshift does have a trouble against like infinite life, but besides the point.
Right. So that's, yeah. I would just go like balls to the wall. I don't think you need to, you know, mess around. Because the other thing is, like, Oblivion Stone is such a beating. Like, eventually they're going to draw an Oblivion Stone, or they're going to have a basic forest for your Blood Moon, or they're going to have a Chromatic Sphere, Chromatic Star, Ancient Stirrings, get the Oblivion Stone, and then whatever problem permanent you have put in their way is just gone.
Sure. No, but I think you said earlier you didn't like the Shael version or whatever.
I don't. I mean, I've never liked it personally. So like there is an element of personal bias there. But I think Black Red is more consistent.
I think Black Red is more consistent. I think right now though the Shael version's good in that, like the Biiiig version, in that like once you have reanimated Grizzlebrand, you just win essentially. Right. And I like that because you're not letting the game drag on. You're not giving these Search for Azcanta decks time to figure out what's going on. You just are doing this very powerful thing right now, and they're dead. You know, which I like. I don't like giving them extra time. I don't like giving any of these decks extra time because what we're seeing now is all these decks fighting to have the best late game. Right. So like, let's kill them right now. You know, like let's get this game done.
Yep. Blood Moon, we've covered. Like if you're gonna play like main deck Blood Moon, like it's fine. You are going to stumble them. You need to capitalize on the stumble. So, like, if follow up your Blood Moon with an Inferno Titan, great. Follow up your Blood Moon with a bunch of elves, not great.
No. But I think what we're seeing now from the decks that are playing main deck Blood Moon is that they have a plan for ending the game. Where, you know, there's been a Temur Moon deck that's been pretty popular. Well, they play Tarmogoyf. Well, you know, Tarmogoyf is going to end the game. That's a beater. That card will finish the game. You know, there's Blue Red Through the Breach is playing Blood Moon. I mean, Through the Breach Emrakul. That's going to end the game. Storm doesn't generally have a problem ending the game.
Yeah, right.
Get your Blood Moon in play and the game's over. But yeah, you know, the days of Blue Moon, I'm going to control the game and play with Blood Moon are gone. You need to be using Blood Moon as disruption, and I'm going to kill you shortly after. You know.
Yeah. A lot of people, I think, are going to be tempted to play Ponza. Personally, I think that's a mistake. It seems like a slam dunk. You're like, well, if all the decks are playing lands, then I'm just going to play a deck that blows up lands. Like, yes, asterisk, you need to have a plan to convert that into a win that is consistent. And when you are playing a deck that has no card draw, that may be tough. And 4 of your slots are Blood Moons, and you're playing 4, 8, 10 ramp spells, 21 lands, and then, the most recent one that did well was also running like Bonfire of the Damned, 3 Madcap Experiment, Platinum Empyrean in the main. Like, that's fine, but like, remember that Platinum Empyrean is just a vanilla 8/8 that says your life total can't change. Well, that's fine. You Madcap Experiment into Platinum Empyrean, you've got your 8/8, your life total can't change. Karn, exile your Platinum Empyrean, get wrecked.
Yeah. But I think what we're seeing now, and a card I really like in these Blood Moon decks, if you're playing green, is Tireless Tracker. I think it's starting to make kind of an up and, a rise up in percentage of Blood Moon lists that it's in. And I love it in those decks. It does exactly what you just said, where it kind of gives card draw to these non-blue Blood Moon decks.
Yep.
And, if you're going to play like a black-red, I like playing, Dark Confidant or Night's Whisper, something of that sort that'll like let you find the pieces that end the game. For this list of decks we're giving out, you mentioned something that main deckable land hate is good, and I agree with you. I think that's a good thing to be doing right now. I will say though that it's kind of hard in Modern to play main deckable land hate, where if you want to play main deckable artifact hate, well, that's readily available. You can play your Kolaghan's commands, you can play your Abrades, you can play your, Oblivion Stones, or not Oblivion Stones, I'm sorry, Oblivion Rings.
Yep.
I guess Oblivion Stone works.
Oblivion Stone would work, yeah.
Yeah, but there are main deckable spells, I should say, that are very good with artifact hate. But there is not, like, a command that says destroy target land. Like, that just doesn't exist. There isn't really main deckable land hate that is just, like, this tack onto a spell to, like, that, like, a fair deck would play, right? You kind of have to mean it in this format. And, I mean, as we've mentioned a bunch, Blood Moon is a way to do that. If you are playing Blood Moon, you have to mean it. You can't just put Blood Moon in a deck. It doesn't work. You're going to lock yourself out just as badly.
Right.
But when you do mean it, it does very well. And there are other decks, like you said, Panza, that just plays all main deck land hate, and it can be good if built correctly. And there was a couple other decks that also did land hate very well. Living End is one of them, just in the sense that it plays main deck Fulminator Mage, because it synergizes with their plan of just play creatures that go to the graveyard, and it's actually one of Living End's better disruptive elements, is just continually take its opponents off mana, Living End, get back a couple fatties and a Fulminator, take them off mana again,
Yep.
So I think that plan is well positioned, and I also think Mono White Death and Taxes is due for a comeback. I think that's a deck that kind of fell off because it was losing to Search for Azcanta decks, but I think, with Field of Ruin kind of making a come out, or a showing out, and, Ghost Quarter and Leonin Arbiter being well positioned against these Scapeshift decks, that I think this could be a good weekend to play Death and Taxes.
All right. I could see that. See, I would play some Arbiter deck, I guess. Like, I would play Tax Racket this weekend. Like, sure. I would put a little more time into it, but like having a win con that isn't affected by Ensnaring Bridge, because like Lantern is a real concern. Like it does get eaten up by Tron, but I think people need to have non-creature ways of winning the game if they're not going to win the game like before Lantern can land an Ensnaring Bridge.
Sure. No, I mean, yeah, I think you're right.
I wanted to talk about a very interesting take on death and taxes. Speaking of, relevant to our current discussion. Bruce by the Magic Guy, fellow card hoarder streamer, 5-0'd a competitive league with a Death and Taxes, Ether Vial, Scab Ruinator, Chalice of the Void deck. And I don't know. I would have to go back and look at his matches because I assume he streamed them. But it kind of hits a lot of the points, right? It has Arbiter Ghost Quarter is great. Even just regular Ghost Quarter is great. Like, let's not, overstate that, because they play, I think they only play one waste, so like the first one they get a land off of, but the rest of them are just strip mines. So that's reasonable. Chalice, if you can ramp into Chalice on 1 on the play, which this deck tries to do with Gemstone Caverns. So like a non-zero number of times you're going to go pre-game Gemstone Caverns, turn 1, land Chalice for 1. And it's the same thing. If your Tron opponent will definitely keep Tron Piece, Forest, Expedition Map, Ancient Stirrings, and a bunch of cantrip artifacts. Like that's a snap keep. You would keep that. You wouldn't necessarily be happy with it because you would like to have 2 Tron pieces, but getting Chalice for 1 shuts off everything. Like, you then have to draw into Sylvan Scrying specifically to get whatever your missing piece is, or just hope that you draw it before you get beaten down with Spellqueller, Scab Ruinator, Smuggler's Copter, like Thalia, like on top of that. And it plays a Death and Taxes kind of game that is familiar in the sense that it has Ether Vial. And I feel like, just once again, like kind of big picture for the brewing portion of the crowd, Ether Vial and Chalice together, I think, is probably underexplored sort of deck building territory for Modern. So that's something to kind of keep in the back of your head. But this deck right now happens to be kind of hitting all the things. It has main deck land hate. It has an insanely fast clock, like Scab Ruinator 5/6 in the air, functionally with haste, like end step off an Ether Vial, swing 5 in the air, is a crazy clock. Spellqueller is insane. Chalice, just totally locks out certain decks. Thalia is great against the spell heavy decks that are running around. So like your blue-white controls and stuff like that, that's going to be like your Search for Azcanta decks hate Thalia.
They do not like Thalia. Agreed.
And then it gets around the sort of card draw problem by having Smuggler's Copter.
I was going to say, I think it's time for Smuggler's Copter to make a breakout. I think it's very, very good in this Chalice of the Void shell, where it's like, you draw your dead 1-drop. Oh, what am I going to do? Oh, we're going to loot it away, and we're going to get a new card.
Yep.
Which you would not be able to do if you were playing, Aether Vial. Like, it's just good with Aether Vial in general. I think it's time. A lot of people fall for the trap, hey, I'm playing Aether Vial. I can't play, this non-creature card because I need creatures to go with my Aether Vials, right? Well, Smuggler's Copter, I think, is probably just good enough. Maybe you should just be playing it.
Yep. And then sideboard.
I will say, too, hold on, before you get to the sideboard, on
Sure.
the note of Aether Vial Chalice of the Void decks that you said kind of was due for a comeback, I know Jonathan Rossum played a 5-color humans list in a Moto PPTQ this weekend.
Yeah.
And he had Aether Vials main because it's 5-color humans and Chalice of the Voids in the sideboard, 4 of them. And he did very well. I think he top 8'd. So I
There
think,
you go.
yeah, I think that's starting to be, a recipe for starting a deck where you start, 4 Chalice, 4 Aether Vial, 52 other cards.
Yeah. Plug in whatever's good.
Yep.
Speaking of things that are good, Meddling Mage. And Meddling Mage type effects in this deck, obviously because of Aether Vial, it's great. Also a great thing to crew Smuggler's Copter with. You don't need it to do anything other than exist, and putting him in the pilot seat of a Smuggler's Copter is a great use for him on the board. Geist needs no introduction. Phyrexian Revoker, specifically with Aether Vial. Like, if somebody, has something they play, and then you can you can't Aether Vial it in response to a Planeswalker loyalty ability because that ability is already on the stack. You could, if you survive that turn or whatever the thing that happens is, if you vial it in their upkeep, then you've shut them off, for the rest of whatever until they can kill your Revoker.
Well, it's also very common to be my Eldrazi Tron opponent cast a Walking Ballista for 10 mana, X equals 5. And you're like, well, I've got 4 X1s in play. This is going to completely end the game. Well, activate Vial in response, Walking Ballista on the stack, put Phyrexian Revoker in play, name Walking Ballista. Okay, your Walking Ballista resolves. You have a 5/5,
Right. Yep. And... yeah, so Forge Tender, other generically good stuff, right? Like Burnt Forge Tender, Core Firewalker, Eidolon Rhetoric. Forge Tender, I think, is especially good here because the decks that are vulnerable to getting sort of aggroed out know that and are running, well, most of them are running Sweltering Suns now, but they're running cheap board sweepers, most of which are red. So, Burnt Forge Tender, great. Violent Burnt Forge Tender in response to an Anger of the Gods. Fantastic. And also, very importantly, Disdainful Stroke. Disdainful Stroke is high on my list right now. I probably will put a couple of them in my Delver sideboard. Just because, man, it covers a lot of bases.
That's a great card right now. Agreed.
It's super easy to cast, and counter your Reality Smasher, counter your, obviously you would like to have Ceremonious Rejection because the 1 mana is a big deal. The nice thing is, Disdainful Stroke gives you additional flexibility because it will also counter Escape Shift. It will also counter Prime Time.
It also counters Cryptic Command. It also counters Past in Flames and Gifts Ungiven. This card is a lot better than the amount of play it's seeing, and it's already seeing a decent amount of play.
Yep. So grab some Disdainful Strokes. And then if you do want to see this deck, you can follow, I don't remember what his real name is. You can follow Bruce by the Magic Eye on Twitter, and he had it posted. In addition to knowing the deck that you are going to play, we also thought it would be relevant for you to know what the decks that you are playing against are going to do to try and kill you. So let's do the rundown of the decks of this type, big mana decks that you are likely to play, and what their plan is.
Yeah, so I think we're just going to cover anything that has a Tron land in it, or has a Valakut the Molten Pinnacle in it. Those are kind of the big mana decks of Modern, right?
Pretty much.
Yep. So, first deck we got, just green X-Tron. Obviously, you can do green-black. Green-red was the staple for a very long time, but it seemed to have fallen out of favor. There is green-white-tron. So, that one was a lot more popular when Infect was a lot bigger. They kind of started using Blessed Alliance to try and be better against the Infect decks. But all of the green X-Trons kind of have the same base of 8 cantripping, mana-fixing baubles, 4 Ancient Stirring, 4 Sylvan Scrying, 4 Expedition Map, and then a bunch of fatties. And what these decks are... Why people play these decks are that they are very consistent. That 20-card base of cantripping, land-finding cards lets them have Tron very reliably by turn 4 in most games. And the fact that the fixing cantrips lets them find their fatties that will let them win the game. And the lands let them cast and find stuff. I mean, they get to play Sanctum of Ugin too, which they can find off Sylvan Scryings and Expedition Maps, and that lets them find, the Ulamog after they cast their Worldbreaker or whatever. And essentially what these decks are very powerful land destruction decks. They're kind of just big Panza.
Yep.
If you will, but it's very effective. If you play against it, it's going to grind you out. You're going to lose the game with like 2 or 3 lands in play and wondering what happened if you were trying to play fair. To beat this deck, you can go about kind of 3 there's 3 ways you can go about, and I would suggest generally doing one of them more than trying to do all 3 or like 2 of them. Like, it's much better to just focus on one of them. You can attack the lands, be it, Blood Moon, be it Molten Rains, be it Ghost Quarters, whatever. And that's effective, but if you're going to do that, you have to do that. You can't just put 2 Molten Rains in your sideboard and hope that's enough. You kind of want like 12 of that effect. Ways to find them. So that's one way. Another way to do it is to attack their kind of consistency engine and Sylvan Scrying, Expedition Map, baubles. A very good way to do this is with Chalice of the Void. Chalice of the Void on 1 is going to turn off 16 of those 20 cards, so it's pretty effective. Another good way to do it is Stony Silence. Stony Silence has historically been very good against this Tron version, where it turns off all of their baubles and Expedition Maps, and even hits their O-Stone for good effect.
Mm. Well, that's their out, right? That's the big thing that they're going to be looking to draw into. So, yeah, and anything that shuts off O-Stone is going to be worth considering.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the other way that people have been trying to go for more is the Disdainful Stroke route, where you kind of counter their big threat, or it's also the Thoughtseize route, where you like Thoughtseize their Karn or whatever, and hope that they have all this mana and nothing to do with it. And I will say that can work, but attempt that one at your own peril, because the deck is kind of built to be very good against Thoughtseize. It kind of gets the mana in play, and then at some point it draws Karn or Ulamog or Ugin, and when it draws that card, your Thoughtseize deck is going to be in a bad spot. So the Thoughtseize route generally isn't great, and then the Disdainful Stroke route would actually be very good if it wasn't for the fact that the Eldrazi's have cast triggers on them. So you can kind of Disdainful Stroke the Karn, Disdainful Stroke the Ugin, and then they cast Ulamog, and you get 2 permanents exiled. And then you still have that 10/10 you got to deal with. So, maybe you can Disdainful Stroke that one too, but you're still down 2 permanents, and they're still probably, going to find another fatty in the next couple turns. So, yeah, like I said, if you want to beat this deck, you got to attack one of its three areas of the deck, and you got to mean it. You can't just do one or the other, or think that, hey, I can play 1 Stony Silence and 2 Molten Rains, and that's going to beat Tron, because that's not going to beat Tron. That might... I mean, maybe the Stony Silence is drawn the exact right time, and it just shuts off enough of their cards that you can, but for the most part, I wouldn't feel comfortable if that was my plan. Just have 2 Molten Rains and a Stony Silence or whatever.
Mm. Yeah, I probably would bring... I don't know. I think you need 4 to 5 kind of like pieces that are going to hit these decks in different ways. So I would look at countering the big stuff, stumbling the small stuff, clocks. I don't know if you can really change your threat profile post board to like really... I guess you could add, if you're playing like a blue-white X deck, I guess you could add a Geist, like that Bruce Spy deck.
I love adding Geist against this deck, actually. I've found Geist to be very, very good against this Tron deck, where a lot of times if they just play a Karn, you're just dead. Like, you can try to fight the Karn, but by the time the game's over, you'll realize the Karn beats you.
Right.
But Karn doesn't just beat a Geist, because Geist is hexproof. So I've actually had multiple games where I just have a Geist in play, and they're like, you're on the play, you cast your turn 3 Geist, you say go. They go, turn 3 Karn, eat one of your lands, and you're like, deal, alright, attack Karn, kill it.
Right.
So, yeah, so I think Geist is good. And I think your number there is right. I think 4 to 5 is a very good thing to shoot for. That can be very tough in Modern, obviously. I think we're both well aware that you only get 15 cards, so just putting 5 dedicated Tron cards into your sideboard is kind of impossible. But what's not impossible is to play Stony Silence because you want to beat Affinity and realizing that has applications in the Tron matchup. Or playing Aven Mind Sensor because you want to be good against, the deck that shuffles a lot, aka Valakut. And realizing that, that has, that can turn off a Sylvan Scrying or a Sanctum of Ugin trigger or whatever. So, finding cards that you would want to play for other decks to hate on them, and, finding that kind of crossover is very important in the format. And, kind of try and find some of the ones that we just described, or that I described above, I guess.
Yep. Where does that leave us? Valakut decks. Good. I think maybe we just ban Valakut.
I don't think we're just going to ban Valakut. Maybe. Let's see what the Pro Tour that happens first.
All right. I can wait.
But before we get to Valakut decks, let's kind of clean up the Tron decks.
Lay it on me.
There are 2 more Tron decks out there that see play. The next most common one by a lot is Eldrazi Tron. It is, I think, a deck people are generally aware of at this point. It's kind of a Chalice of the Void prison deck that also relies on fast mana to cast big creatures.
Yep.
I guess it's a very strange deck. I've played the deck before in events. It kind of feels like 67 cards that are very good out of a 75 card deck or something, where it's just like there aren't even enough colorless cards the deck really wants to play to even kind of make the deck work, I guess. So some of the sideboard cards are nonsense. It doesn't get to play some of the things that it wants to play, but it's still really powerful, and it's great. We kind of set it out. The description we have of Eldrazi Tron versus the green X Tron decks are that it is better versus land hate because it runs cheaper spells generally. It has Chalice of the Void, which can just win games by itself. And it also has the ability to hate on hands in Thought Not Seer, which is, I think, like the second most played card in Modern. It's a very, very good card. But it also, still has the busted turn 3 Karn draws that, Green X-Tron will get sometimes, so... Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the same deal. It's kind of the same, hey, I'm just going to use these Tron lands to generate tons of mana and cast really big things. But the problem with it is that the hate cards that work very well against Green X-Tron do not work all that well against Eldrazi Tron generally. Land hate of the Molten Rain variety is still going to be good. Although Blood Moon is much worse against this deck. Despite it seeming like Greentron with its Oblivion Stones and Karns and Nature's Claims would be better against Blood Moon. It actually turns out Eldrazi-tron is much better because it can play to the board quicker, so it can have stuff on board before you play the Blood Moon. It is very adept at finding its basic wastes and can use the wastes to play through Blood Moon.
Right.
And then also just has ways to it still plays creatures it can cast through Blood Moon. It still plays Walking Ballista. All His Dust is very effective at removing Blood Moons, so it's much better at beating Blood Moon. Still not great at getting its lands destroyed. Land destruction can just be time walks against this deck. But they can also be very, very poor sometimes when it's flooding, I guess. So that one's kind of hit or miss. But the thing that's very good against Eldrazi-tron is sweeper effects, which are just kind of nonsense against Big Tron, because that deck is mostly Planeswalkers. So,
right.
You want to beat Eldrazi-tron, play your, Dusk Dawns, play your Damnations, play your Wrath of Gods, your Supreme Verdicts. We even got a special one coming later for you guys too, but yeah, kind of bigger removal. Anger of the Gods is not going to help you very much here. There's a lot of X4, 5 toughness guys, so you kind of want bigger sweepers, but O-Stone is good against it, so you could play that if you were the other Tron decks.
Sure.
But yeah, sweepers are good against it. Counterspells would actually be very good against Eldrazi-tron, except for the fact that they play Cavern of Souls, so if you have a way to deal with Cavern of Souls, i.e. like Field of Ruin built into your mana base, then counterspells are very good against this deck. But that one is, again, kind of hit or miss, so you kind of got to get lucky with it, I guess.
Right.
Or just have a plan for it. And then the last Tron deck we had is Mono Blue Tron. This is kind of an older Tron variant that you don't see as much anymore, but still exists. It is much different than the other two decks, actually. They are... I mean, obviously Greentron and Eldrazi-tron are very different decks, but Blue-tron feels much, much different. Obviously all these Tron decks rely on casting giant things with all the colorless mana they generate, but this one is much more graveyard and artifact-centric. Kind of the reason to play blue in these decks is the card Academy Ruins, which is just a colorless land. But it is a land that they can find with, Expedition Map when they're flooding. And it is kind of one of the most powerful late-game engines in the entire format. It stops you from decking. It lets you recur powerful artifacts, which is why they play powerful artifacts. And in fact, this deck's kind of calling card is that it can establish Mindslaver locks. So, plays Mindslaver, sacrifices Mindslaver, takes your turn, makes you do nothing on your turn, goes back to its turn, upkeep, puts Mindslaver back on top of its library with Academy Ruins, draws Mindslaver, casts Mindslaver, and rinse and repeat. So, beating this deck is a lot easier, which is why it's falling out of favor more. But it is much, much weaker to aggressive starts because it just does not play to the board well at all. It has very few impactful early plays despite playing counterspells. And then it's also not great against Graveyard Hate, and Artifact Destruction tends to be pretty good against it. So it is the weakest of the Tron decks currently, at least, and obviously it's not going to be seen as much, but you still need to know how to beat it if you're going to play Modern. So when you're playing against it, bring in your Graveyard Hate, whatever that is, maybe Surgicals, maybe Relics, maybe Rest in Pieces. You want to turn off the Mind Slavers. You want to turn. They play Gifts Ungiven sometimes too, so you want to turn those off. And then Ancient Grudge is going to be very good against this deck, even though it's not generally great against the other Tron decks. So that's what we got. But what do we got for Valakut, Aaron?
Okay, so Valakut is a hassle.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Let me, I always have to read the text of this stupid card. Oh, wow. Interesting. There are 8 cards that contain the word Valakut. All right, so Valakut the Molten Pinnacle. Non-legendary land for some reason.
Probably should be legendary, but it's
should
not.
Definitely be legendary. Valakut the Molten Pinnacle enters the battlefield tapped, whatever. When a mountain enters the battlefield under your control, if you control at least 5 other mountains, you may have Valakut the Molten Pinnacle deal 3 damage to target creature or player. So you need to have, on the battlefield, 5 mountains plus a Valakut. And the 6th mountain is what triggers it.
Correct.
When
sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, because you just had a judge explain this to you, and there was a heartbreaker on camera. I think it was on camera concession at the GP where Living End player conceded when he had actually won the game, and it was because of this very issue.
He did not understand how the card Valakut worked. And yeah, he had 3 different ways to win the game with the card he cast. Correctly chose one of them. Couldn't demonstrate that he understood how the way he did it won the game, and just conceded, which was a strange outcome. In fact, a lot of people thought he had already won. So very odd, but also kind of a sad thing that you could do so well in this tournament and just lose to not knowing how this card works. So we're going to fix that for you guys. I have played against Valakut many times, and I've lost to it many times, let me tell you. So I have had the, Scape Shift put 6 mountains in play thing happen to me a lot. Tends to be very good against the decks I play, so, that's going to happen from time to time, but I've also had to try to fight this a number of times, and there tend to be a couple decision points that happen. So when your opponent casts Scape Shift, if they have 7 or more lands, they're going to sacrifice some number of those lands, generally 7, maybe 8. Maybe they're only sacrificing non-Valakut cards because they already have a Valakut in play, whatever. What they're doing is they're going to get 6 mountains. And the way Valakut works is it creates 1 trigger for each mountain that enters the battlefield. Now, this trigger has 2 checkpoints, so it's better to think of the triggers like it created 2 triggers, essentially, right? Now, that can sound confusing, but what it is it's 1 trigger with 2 checkpoints, but you need to imagine each checkpoint as its separate happening to kind of fully understand how the card works. So what happens is when a mountain enters the battlefield, the first checkpoint is, are there 5 other mountains? And that's the one that people always see. They look at the card and they say, oh, this is what it says, right? Are there 5 other mountains? If yes, trigger goes on the stack. Boom. We have 3 damage dealt to target player. You choose your target, generally opponent's face, although sometimes you'll choose a creature or whatever. But so you put the trigger on the stack with the target, and now the triggers have to go to resolve, and this is the second checkpoint. And now at this point, when the trigger is going to say, I'm doing 3 damage to you, there still has to be 5 other mountains, and it has to maintain this through the life of the trigger, while, from going on the stack to resolving. So what happens here, and this is where people always try to fight it, is the most common play, I think, is where, they put the triggers on the stack and then the person goes, oh, I'm going to Ghost Quarter your Valakut. Well, the triggers don't care about Valakut. The triggers are already on the stack. All they care about are there 5 other mountains in play. So what happens is, the Valakut's gone. Well, all these triggers still see 5 other mountains. You take however many triggers were on the stack times the 3 damage. So generally like 18 or 21.
Yep.
So the correct way to do this, if you want to beat them, is to hit one of their mountains. Now what's going to happen here is, Ghost Court is a good example. It's a commonly played modern card. If you Ghost Court one of their mountains, this could work out very well for you if they don't have any more mountains. But if they have more mountains, this is going to go very badly for you. So let's say you Ghost Court, they put 6 triggers on the stack from a Valakut. You Ghost Court a mountain. If they have more mountains in their deck, they're going to go get another mountain, and that's going to create another trigger. So they're going to get another trigger, and then all of the things will check when they resolve, and they will still see 5 mountains. So that's bad for you. What you're going to do done is essentially just 3 damage extra to yourself. Which I mean, not good, right? That's...
Don't do that. That is not a winning line.
Yeah, it's still just going to have a loss for you. But if they don't have a mountain, then you destroyed one of their mountains, so they put, still 6 triggers on the stack. Now what's going to happen is those triggers are going to go to resolve. And when they resolve, the triggers are going to see only 4 other mountains. So what's going to happen is the triggers for the mountains that are still in play are going to fizzle and they will not resolve. But the trigger for the mountain that you destroyed will still resolve because it will still see 5 other mountains. So what happens is instead of taking the 18 or 21 or 32 or whatever the math they showed was, you're going to end up taking 3 damage. Which in a lot of cases is acceptable, right?
Yes.
So in that scenario, the way to beat this deck is generally like, hold up your Fulminator Mage, they go to combo, blow up a mountain, I take 3, you kind of just waste all your resources, I'm going to kill you on my turn or whatever. And that's exactly what happened in the top 8. The guy cast a Beast Within on the guy's mountain. He should have just taken 3 damage, untapped, and killed him, but didn't realize that's how it worked and conceded, unfortunately. So, just be sure to remember that, there's going to be 2 separate checkpoints here, and it has to certify that there are 5 mountains at both checkpoints.
Right. Now, Prismatic Omen is also a commonly played card in these decks. And Prismatic Omen is 1 green enchantment for... and all it says is a very simple line of text, which is each land that you control is every basic land type, in addition to its blah blah blah, whatever the wording for that is. Basically, Prismatic Omen shuts off your ability to cut them out of that 5th mountain as long as they have 6 or more lands, because it also, the Valakut trigger sees the Valakut itself as a mountain, so it just makes it basically impossible, not impossible, but impractical to keep them from going off. It's kind of like it's like Gifts Ungiven in Storm when they have a bear out. Like, if they have Gifts Ungiven and a Brawl, you've lost. If they have a Prismatic Omen and you don't have 3 functional strip mines in your hand, you've lost. So attack in that case, you have to attack the Prismatic Omen and then also knock them off of 5 mountains.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the big thing with Prismatic Omen is just knowing that once they get to 6 lands, you're now in lethal territory. Whereas, before they needed to generally be at 7 or 8. Right.
Yeah, 7 is probably the most common because, having a one shock, not even a fetch shock, puts you at 18, and that's all they need. So There is old Scapeshift used to have blue in it, and it used to run like a pretty interesting like control package. Like this is like a 3-color deck that used to run like Cryptic Command and stuff like that. The deck is certainly soft to cheap permission. So like if they go totally shields down, tap out for Escape Shift, and you Spell Pierce it, like they just actually another important thing to note about Escape Shift is they decide how many lands to sacrifice after they've already cast the spell. So if you respond to the spell by countering it, it's not the same as paying an additional cost. So it's not like if you counter Cathartic Reunion, because the wording is as an additional cost to cast this, discard 2 cards from your hand, then they're going to discard the cards no matter what, even if the spell gets countered. Escape Shift is not like that. You cast the spell, and then a separate thing, you decide how many lands you're going to sacrifice. So if something happens to interrupt that process, they can just choose not to sacrifice any lands.
Yeah, it's actually a great call, Aaron.
Because I've had that happen as well. But the way that it used to be was, have your own Spell Pierce, have your own Cryptic, have your own whatever. It was a little clunkier, and it was also before the printing of the extra dual fetchable land type cards. So like it was long before Cinderglade. So they had to kind of go into another color anyways to have a density of mountains. So using that access to that other mana was also useful. A Bring to Light is kind of like this, but also plays all of the mountain all the mountain shocks, and uses that to cast Bring to Light. And my first impression, or my first thought, was that Bring to Light Scapeshift would be kind of terrible right now. But you had said that somebody who's actually playing it, and it's decent.
Well, I agree. I actually agreed with you that it is bad, but the thing is that it's actually very good against the Tron and other Titan Shift decks. So, it is the good one for all of these mirrors, because it does the same things the other decks are doing, but has disruption that lines up better against them, I guess.
Got it. Okay.
So, yeah, I mean, I think overall it's a much worse deck than the other ones we have mentioned, but it could be a good meta call.
Okay, that's fair.
The one thing I wanted to point out about this deck too was that this is the deck that's running the fewest mountains, because it has to run like a bunch of blue-green lands and just other duels that aren't mountains. So it is the one that's very susceptible to the Ghost Core to you when you have, after you cast Escape Shift play. Whereas the other just straight red-green decks that generally the Ghost Core to play doesn't generally work at all. But this one it can, and this one they can actually. I played the deck before, a couple of years ago, and there are times where you will cast Escape Shift and realize you don't have 6 mountains left in your library and just concede, which is kind of embarrassing, but that happens with this deck. So this is the one where you want to make them show you. You want to make them, they cast Escape Shift. Don't concede. Make sure that they have 6 mountains left in their deck, and make them show you that they have lethal you.
Yep. Titan Shift is the sort of chocolate chip cookie of these decks. If you've already got a ton of mana, you kind of want to have something else to do with it. And so the other thing that you would do with it is cast Primeval Titan. And Primeval Titan acts as a sort of mini scape shift that can get you, if you already have 5 mountains in play, you can get Valakut Mountain, and they will see each other when they come in off that trigger. And then when it attacks, you can go get 2 more mountains, and then, and also attack with a 6/6 trample. I mean, it is quite good. They don't run blue. They don't really have card draw to speak of. The flip side is, in order to sort of smooth out when they get their prime times, they run Summoner's Pact instead. You can certainly make someone lose the game by impacting their ability to pay for a pact trigger. So that's maybe something to think about. Like, Ghost Quarter doesn't get there, but Tech Edge certainly does. So if you're on the Tech Edge plan, or if if you've got Leonin Arbiter, Ghost Quarter, something like that, where they can, they go to their upkeep, and does that work? Let me think. They go to their upkeep, their pack trigger goes on the stack, you respond to the pack trigger by strip mining them. That doesn't work.
Well, you would just do it on your turn, right?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, do it in your end step.
Or on your main phase. You can do it whenever.
Sure. Well, you have
get
to
them ahead of time.
Yeah, you have to get them to 3 lands.
Well, another play that's kind of common that I guess you wouldn't think of right away, but is common if you've played the format a couple times, a decent amount, is that to pay for the pack trigger, you have to pay during your upkeep, which you don't get a land drop. So generally, they get away around playing this card by getting a creature that ramps them further. So you cast your Summoner's Pact, get a Primeval Titan. Well, now next turn you have 8 mana or whatever after you cast it. But they have to pay during their upkeep. So bounce effects are also very good. So if you want to go Cryptic Command, bounce one of your lands, like even a green source, well, now they can't pay for it in their upkeep. They lose on the spot.
Yep. Let's see. There's a non-zero chance that they would have something like Kessig Wolf run. It's unlikely you see it more in like Bloom decks, but there's nothing saying that you couldn't run it. So that's something to be aware of.
I would be more I'd be more weary of Kessig Wolf run. Like, if I don't see Prismatic Omen, I don't think they're going to play Prismatic or Kessig Wolf run. But once you see a Prismatic Omen, I would have Kessig Wolf run on my radar.
Sure.
If that makes sense.
Yep.
Because, Prismatic Omen will turn that card into a mountain, which kind of mitigates the downside of it in their deck, and it's a very powerful card in that deck.
Yep. And then Breach Titan, obviously we've talked about Breach at length earlier in the show. This is just another way of getting a Primeval Titan into play, and because it also gets haste, it actually just turns into a full scape shift in the sense that you can get 4 lands. So obviously you have at least 2 mountains if you're casting through the Breach, because it's 2 red. So you can go get...
No, through the Breach is 4 in a red. The 2 red is the Splice.
Oh, it's the Splice. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But that is an easy thing. So even if you pay full retail for it, you have to have at least 1 mountain. And in these decks, that's not... They're going to be playing way more than that.
Yeah, they always have more mountains than that.
So you're going to go primetime, get whatever you are missing, either a Valakut or, your sixth mountain.
Well, generally with Breach, they just start on 2 Valakuts almost every time, because...
Oh, yeah, because then when
they get an
the attack
phase
trigger...
at the same turn.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they'll get 2 Valakits, and that's also that's another thing is the multiple Valakits, because they are not legendary. The triggers do stack, so if you are kind of back in the situation that we talked about with the Valakut triggers, the two events, instead of there being 18 triggers on the stack, there'll be 36 triggers on the stack, but they're still all going to check to see if there's 5 other mountains. And if there are, in that example, you would take 6. Or if there aren't, you would take 6, and if there are, then you're dead.
Yep.
Because that is also, like I said, that is also confusing. And obviously, Breach has a lot of flexibility attached to it. They are probably going to be running, Desperate Ritual is the arcane one.
Yeah, they will play Desperate Ritual. They will play Simian Spirit Guide.
Yeah. So
this
they're
kind of much more all in.
Yeah, they may be ready to sort of mini scape shift you as early as like turn 2 or 3. That's rare, and it doesn't necessarily guarantee a kill. I'm trying to think. If you have no blockers, you take. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4. So you need 3 lands to go off with.
Those ones won't guarantee a kill, but they will do that often to set up their other spells. So like Search for Tomorrow and Sakura Tribal are much better once Valakut's already in play.
Sure.
So they will kind of power out a really quick Titan. Go get 2 Valakuts, attack, put 2 more mountains in play, and even if those mountains didn't do damage yet, well now every Search for Tomorrow and every just fetch land you draw, everything you draw essentially is going to deal 6 damage to them. So it's like pretty easy to win the game after that.
Yeah. So those are the Titan variants that I would expect to see. A lot of them do also run Inferno Titan, either out of the main or out of the side. Inferno Titan is not a slouch. And
no, it's a real card.
That card gets it done. So be able to kill a 6/6 that doesn't die to fail push.
I would also be prepared for Tireless Tracker now, too.
Yes. Yep.
They are all generally playing 2 to 3 Tireless Tracker, because one of the issues they have in these Titan Shift and Breach Titan variants is that their top end is very powerful, but if you can counter their top end or Thoughtseize it or whatever, their deck doesn't really do anything without it, so they really are reliant on casting their top end.
Right.
And they don't really have card draw to find it, so anything that kind of helps them find it, they're kind of in the market for, and Tireless Tracker is very good at that, so don't just like immediately cut your bolts when you're sideboarding.
Right. So that's pretty much what I have on Valakut. I think we're probably just gonna do the spiel and then spice rack it, put a bow on it, and wrap it up, because I am sick and getting sicker. So before we get to the spice rack, you can visit us on Facebook, facebook.com/Thoughtseize, all spelled out. You can follow us on Twitter. It's at T1Thoughtseize, and Zach is at A22EN. You can watch the stream at twitch.tv/T1Thoughtseize, sponsored by our friends at Card Hoarder. You can see our YouTube videos at youtube.com/Thoughtseize, all spelled out. You can see all of our content on turn1thoughtseize.com. And if you are listening to us on iTunes, please rate and review us. Also, I recently got the Reddit handle T1 Thoughtseize, and I've been trying to sort of be active on the Modern forum. Not only they've been gracious enough to let me post about the episodes, but there's a sort of rule of thumb for people that post sort of self promote there, which is, ideally you would try and keep a high ratio of posts that aren't about your thing that you're trying to promote to posts that are. So I've been trying to do that. So definitely, if you have questions, you can feel free to post them in the Modern Magic subreddit, and I will usually see them, or you can send me a message on there as well. So keep an eye out for that. I've found some interesting stuff on there and tried to be productive. Somebody actually posted a really interesting Abzan monastery mentor list that
I like it.
They were like, could this be a thing? And I took it and I sort of like tinkered with it a little bit, and it's interesting. I don't know if it's there like right this second, but there is something very interesting to me about like Dark Confidant, Monastery Mentor, Lingering Souls, Abrupt Decay.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds good to me, man.
Like I'm
into that.
I'm interested in that. So the Spice Art card for this week, I also is sort of GP Oklahoma related, which is Settle the Wreckage. This is a card that we talked about in our Excellence set review. An instant speed exiling Plaguewind for 4 mana is pretty great. Its power was displayed on camera at Oklahoma City. I believe it was round 1. It was Slivers versus blue-white or blue-white-red control. I don't remember exactly which one. But the Slivers player had a very nice board, a diffusion sliver, so the point removal was getting taxed, and doing what slivers do, which is pretty much just turn them sideways, and just bam, tap 4 mana, settle the wreckage. It is 2 white for an instant. Exile all attacking creatures target player controls. That player may search his or her library for that many basic land cards, put those cards onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle his or her library. So it's basically like a super path.
Wrath to exile, if you will.
Wrath to exile, indeed.
Yeah.
But this card is the real deal. I mean, we don't get. So instant speed wraths are rare. They're extremely rare in white. The only other one that I can think of off the top of my head is Consume the Meek, which is in black and at 5 mana, and it has a 3 CMC or less restriction.
I think is there a white-black one? I think it's called Merciless Eviction.
Merciless Eviction.
Sorcery.
It's a sorcery, and it's also 6 mana.
Yeah, I think there is like a 6 mana or like a 7 mana Wrath that's instant speed. I don't remember it off the top of my head, but it's not good enough to see play.
Well, there was one in
Iona's something. I don't know.
No, there was one in Shadows. Purge the Sinful or something like that.
Descend upon the Sinful? That one was sorcery too, though.
Was it?
Yeah, it is hard to find instant speed ones. That's the point we're making.
Now, as someone, I've definitely played my fair share of Consume the Meek. I've blown out many players with it. I would play this in a heartbeat, and plan to. This is actually one of the cards that I pre-ordered from Ixalan. So, I think it's main deckable, probably as a one of. I think 2 in the 75 is probably a good start. But, at the end of the day, basic land is not going to kill you. But a wall of slivers certainly will. So
that's very true.
I'm sure that player was very happy to pay 4 mana to not get destroyed.
No, I mean, and we see too that Path to Exile is one of the most played cards in the format, right?
Yep.
Where it's like you don't really care that you're giving a basic lane generally in this format anyway.
Yeah.
And I will say I have been playing this card a lot in Standard. I've been playing Approach of the Second Sun's deck in Standard. And one of the things that's like very clear about the card is it gets a lot worse in multiples. I guess kind of better too. The more you have in your deck, the more likely your opponent is to play around the card. And if your opponent, the card is not so powerful that your opponent can't play around it. In fact, it's pretty easy to play around if your opponent's good and knows what they're doing. So, having a lot of them is just going to set up a spot where your opponent's playing around it. But at the same time, them playing around it when you don't have it ends up being very good for you because they'll make really weird attacks that just don't make any sense. So
sure,
that can be very powerful. And if you do play 4, a lot of times they'll be like, hey, he may or may not have it here. I'll like halfway attack. Then you settle them. And they're like, okay, well, he already cast 1. Does he have another one? You're like, all right, settle again your next turn. And they're like, okay, he's already cast 2. He can't have 3. Attack with everything. And then you get him, right? So I don't really like playing 2 with this card. I think you either kind of want to have it as like the one of fun of get him, or you want to have like be more dedicated to him and just kind of like almost be like a spell version of Ensnaring Bridge. You don't get a combat step, So
yep.
2 ways to play it, both fun, both pretty strong. I will say once you've cast 1, when you get to 6 mana and just pass, and you have like 2 cards in hand, it's like pretty obvious you have Snapcast to settle the wreckage up. So it's generally pretty easy for people to play around that one, but still hard to play around the second time. So
yep. So that, as they say, is that. Thanks so much for hanging out, and we will catch up with you next time.
Love you guys.